And I'm back. Hopefully I can breathe a little bit better this time. And going right into it, the history of evolution. Where in the world did the idea come from that things left to themselves can improve with time? Well, gee, Kent, I don't know. Ever had a paper cut? See, I've gotten paper cuts in my life. Little, slices in the skin, bleed a little bit. I don't put anything on them. I don't put a band-aid or bandage or whatever. I don't put antibiotic cream. I just leave them to themselves, and they get better over time. Did I just blow up your entire opening statement? Why, yes, I did. No one really says that everything left to itself can improve over time. The only people who say that kind of thing are idiots like you in order to make an argument, an appeal to ridicule. The Earth doesn't improve over time, but it does change. And animals can grow, plants can grow. Because we have this thing, you may have heard of it. I don't see it often myself, but I've heard of this thing outside, like a big light bulb, but there's no dimmer switch on it. It just, it's on a timer or something. It's called the sun. Because of that thing, just showering the Earth with energy, heat, plants can grow. And because of that, animals can eat. And because of that, they can also grow. It's amazing, really. Things left to themselves is not a thing that is really seen in our universe. So why the fuck is this your opening statement for the history of evolution? If anything, that statement would be an argument against the conclusion of evolution, not the history. Where did it come from? Oh, well, where did we get this idea? It just doesn't make any sense. It's a really bad opening statement. Who would start a crazy idea like that? Well, excluding Darwin, Lamarck, although he had a slightly different idea, and other people whose names I don't know. I mean, the reason Darwin is pointed out as being the father of evolution is because he kind of set it out on paper the first. He was the first person to codify it as much as he did, to really have a solid hypothesis that got confirmed as a theory. So who would start a crazy idea like that? Not exactly Darwin, but certainly he got the ball rolling in a major way. Perhaps he didn't do it first, but he did it best at the time. This idea is the opposite of everything that we observe in the world today. Again, paper cuts. No, you're wrong. Shut the fuck up. For instance, all the highways in our nation today, left to themselves, decay, deteriorate, and fall apart. Yes, Kent. You know what else highways don't have? Penises and vaginas. Highways don't fuck, and they're not living organisms, so they don't have the self-repair mechanism that our body does. A house left to itself will become a wreck. Same thing said twice. Makes it more convincing, I guess. Didn't the same thing happen in the atheism series, the one I did before this, where they said the same thing over and over in different words, just to really push that into the dumb, empty skulls that would be reading it? It takes work and constant planning to make anything improve. Well, no, it takes planning and constant work, perhaps. I mean, come on, Kent. Put some effort into this thing, this document from 1991. Everything tends toward disorder. Well, perhaps that's true in the universe at large, but there are pockets of order in that larger thing. So no, not everything tends toward disorder. The first and second laws of thermodynamics are well-established scientific laws that have never been observed in the universe to be broken. Correct. The first law says that matter cannot be created nor destroyed by ordinary means. No, Kent, it says that energy cannot be created or destroyed by ordinary means. And in fact, I think it says by any means, but I could be wrong there. It does say energy, not matter. Matter is destroyed all the time. Ever hear of a nuclear reactor, Kent? I mean, antimatter is a real thing, and antimatter annihilates matter in a huge release of energy. The matter itself is destroyed, the energy is not. The energy contained in the matter is released. but it's still there, 100%. So matter can be created or destroyed by ordinary. In fact, there's an even better way of presenting how matter and energy can be created or destroyed, but I can't find my lighter. It's called fire, you stupid fuck. Fire can destroy matter, or at least convert it into other types, and while releasing large quantities of energy. Matter can be created or destroyed. Of course it can. Energy, however, always remains constant. The sum of energy is always the same, as far as I understand the first law of thermodynamics, and I'm no physicist. We do not see anything being created today, and yet we do see an entire universe of created material. Well, we don't see anything being created today. I would like you, Kent Hovind, to go and say that to William fucking Lane fucking Craig, who says that he was created from nothing. Because there's a conflict here. Although I'm sure you both believe the exact same thing, so who the fuck knows. We do not see an entire universe of created material, however, because what we see is an entire universe. We don't say from the get-go, oh, well, that's created material. Because that would make us religious. And that would mean that we are wrong. This clearly indicates a creator, right? Because if you assume that the universe is made of created material, then there must be a creator. And that creator has to have a son named Jesus, and also wants his son, who is also himself the creator, to get nailed to a dead tree to suffer, so that he can come back in 3 days and make fun of Jews, and then have them exterminated by Nazis later on. I mean, if you're just going to start throwing out baseless assumptions like this clearly indicates a creator, why not go full retard and just pile on the stuff that means this creator has to be your personal version of God? I mean, there's nothing in that statement that says it isn't Vishnu. Nothing at all. This clearly indicates a creator. Okay, fine. It's Vishnu. No, it's Loki. No, it's a flying spaghetti monster. No, it's Gerp Flaps, god of the universe. No, it's a universe-creating space pixie. It clearly indicates a creator. No, it doesn't. It doesn't even hint at a creator. It doesn't hint that there must be a creator. It doesn't indicate a goddamn thing. It's just an assumption that you make. There are people in the world today who wish to avoid the concept of God, and boy am I fucking envious of them. For some reason, I put myself into these situations and aggravate myself on a nearly daily basis. Why? I don't fucking know, but I do it because I think it's important. I would love to avoid the concept of God. I would love it if the concept of God disappeared off the face of the earth, if finally society and human civilization grew the fuck up out of its diapers and started, being realistic. I could only wish. But in the meantime, there's no avoiding the concept of God because religious people make up a large majority of the human population, so it's there at every fucking turn. They do not like the idea of a God telling them what to do. Well, if I believed in a God that was capable of telling me what to do, I would probably not like that too much, but, I wouldn't like it if fairies came and stole my socks either. I mean, if we're just making shit up, why not go full retard? Therefore, they have come up with the most dangerous, damnable doctrine. Oh, the repetition again. Ever imagined. The most dangerous, damnable doctrine ever imagined. It's a serious book, folks. Evolution. Comma, evolution. I would have used a column myself. ... evolution. But no, this one feels a comma was more appropriate. Perhaps it's up to taste. But, whatever. It's not like any of this is valid in any sense. I would like in this chapter to trace the history of evolutionary doctrine. Where did this dangerous doctrine come from? And it's doctrine all the time. Doctrine. We're at the end, nearly the end of the first page of chapter 1, the history of evolution, and he's just getting at I would like to trace the history of evolutionary doctrine. We know that you would. You said so in your fucking introduction, and it's the title of the fucking chapter. Get to the fucking point. Where did this dangerous doctrine come from? Question, paragraph break. Evolution is purely a religion. No, Kent. That's chapter 2, remember? There's no scientific evidence at all to back up any form of macroevolution. Right. Just like there's no scientific evidence at all to back up any form of marathon. You can walk one step, but you can't walk a whole bunch. The technical definition of evolution means change. No, that's a colloquial definition. You know, the common everyday definition. The technical definition of evolution is, with regards to biology, transmission of genetic traits through generations with modification. That kind of thing. You know, that's the technical definition. Not one word for a colloquial definition that only simpletons like yourself would use. There's no question that things do change. Well, great. Evolution exists. Why is this in the history? All change is directed either downward toward less order if left to themselves. I'll read that again so you can catch how horrible the sentence is. All change is directed either downward toward less order if left to themselves. What selves? Or upward with a master-mind behind it. No. I mean, plants don't have a person growing them. You do have bonsai trees, but no. And what the hell is downward and upward? What are these directions? What the fuck does downward mean? Oh, how are you feeling today? A little bit downward. Well, gee, I hope you win the lottery. That'll upward your feelings. The fuck? Doctoral dissertation. I need to keep reminding you because this book, document, essay is a doctoral dissertation, allegedly. The cities that we live in have evolved over the years. In a sense, yes, they have. The difference is that buildings do not have a penis and a vagina, and they don't fucking make little baby buildings. The city where you are now probably did not even exist 300 years ago. Unless you live in not America. Because most of the cities in the world are a hell of a lot older than 300 years. It's only in the Americas, which were discovered recently, you know, historically speaking, that we have such young cities. I have gone to Vietnam, Thailand, and right in the middle of these sprawling cities are ancient ruins that are far older than anyone I would know, and far older than 300 years. I remember just driving from a resort in Vietnam to some other town. Forget the names now, it's been too long. But this highway in the middle of nowhere has a tiny little village. You know, it practically looked like what is the word for a bidonville? Just sheet metal housing, you know, just temporary slum. And right in the middle, next to the road, is this ancient ruin, half collapsed on ancient bricks. The city where you are now probably did not even exist 300 years ago, only if you're American. I mean, even London's older than 300 years, I'm pretty sure. A college professor told me that cities evolve with time. Okay, the cities that we live in have evolved over the years. A college professor told me that cities evolve with time. And there's always these little single quotes around the word evolve. Why are you repeating the same thing with only one sentence in between? A college professor told me, I said to him, I agree. If you use this as your definition of evolve, then you are including a design, a designer, and lots of work, -- planned, intelligent progress, not chaos ordered by self. Not one of the buildings in your city built itself by the material rising up out of the ground. End quote. What the fuck was that? No one says that that's what evolution means. And no one says that the cities evolve by means of reproduction with variation. No one says that, except Kent Hovind, in order to point out how fucking stupid that is, because it is. But he's trying to push this idea that scientists believe in really crazy shit, which he believes in. It did not happen that way. Damn right it didn't. Why the fuck would you say it? It does not ever happen that way. It will never happen that way. 3 sentences. Repeating to make sure that you get the point, get the point, get the point, get the point, get the point. Always repeat so that it's true. If you repeat a line often enough, it will become true. That is the truth. See what I'm doing there? It requires intelligence and a designer. For houses, yes. For making babies, clearly, Kent Hovind, no intelligence was required, and your designer was a stupid bitch who really should have used a condom. And no, I don't even feel sorry saying that about Kent Hovind's mother. She's a stupid bitch who should have used a condom. We would have been so much better off today. For one thing, there'd be one less tax fraud in prison. Ha ha! Fuck you, Kent Hovind. And fuck your mom. When I speak of evolution, I am not referring to small minor changes that naturally occur as animals have to make some adjustments to their environment. No, because if you're speaking about small minor changes that naturally occur as animals have to make some adjustments to the environment, if you're speaking of that, why would you refer to that? No, when I talk about evolution, I mean magical poof dog out of nowhere land magic. That's what I mean by evolution, that thing that nobody says, nobody believes in, that can happen. That's what I mean. That's why evolution is wrong, because I don't know how words work. For instance, if we released hundreds of rabbits in an area with cold winters, only the animal with a heavier fur would survive. Yes, survival of the fittest. So within a few years, the population will have a little heavier fur than the earlier populations. Exactly. Evolution. Right there. Again, though, how is this history of evolution? Just say. And I can't breathe again. These small minor population shifts brought about by environment are referred to as microevolution. And if you have a lot of microevolution happening, eventually you get macroevolution, because that's what the difference is. Micro, step, 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 step. Macro, lots of steps. There has been no change in the genetic material of the rabbit, except for the whole heavier fur thing, proving that this science teacher doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. You know, if they have heavier fur, their genetic material has changed, and then that means there has been change in the genetic material, and Kent Hovind is a fucking douchebag. And again, I ask the question, what the fuck does this have to do with the history of evolution? Just saying. You know, because I gotta keep pointing these things out for my own sanity. There has only been a change in the ratio of the population. What the fuck does that mean? You still have the same kind of animal. What the fuck do you expect? That they become dogs? Oh, these rabbits have heavier fur. Poof! One just exploded and now you have a chihuahua for some reason. If... Told you I couldn't breathe. If that climate were to change back to a milder climate, the population of animals would change back to having a lighter fur. But the genetic material would not be changed because I don't know what any words mean, says Kent Hovind. Macroevolution would be defined as changing into a different kind of animal. Only by you, and no it doesn't. There is no similarity between microevolution and macroevolution, except it's the same fucking thing with a different time scale. Many evolutionists will use microevolution to try to prove that macroevolution is true. That reason for that is because macroevolution is what we call a bunch of microevolution. That's it. There's no distinction. It's the exact same mechanism, only over a longer period of time. It's like you look at your parents, and then you look at your great-great-great-great-grandparents in a photo album. Those changes are macro changes. Each step in between is a micro change. Yeah, sure, you're the same species, God damn, I really need to breathe. You're still the same species. But there are changes in the genetic material. So, the fuck is Kent Hovind talking about? And again, history? We must guard ourselves not to fall for this false logic. Oh, if only your idiot followers would guard themselves against false logic, Kent Hovind. The idea that evolutionists try to get across today is that there's a continual upward progression. The fuck does that mean? There's no upward progression. They claim that everything is getting better, improving all by itself, as if there's an inner drive towards more perfection and order. What the fuck does perfection mean? What the fuck does order mean? No one says evolution has to do with perfection or order. It means adaptation. You adapt to the environment until you become more adapted. Period. There's no perfection. There's no purity. There's none of this bullshit that you're trying to push. Evolution is not about perfection or some inner drive. It's not like, I need my liver to operate at more efficiency. That's probably going to be a gift too. If I were popular, but I'm not, so it won't be. Missed opportunity, I think. Anyway, side note. No one says that evolution has to do with perfection or order. It's just we adapt to the environment. Adaptation. That's it. This is totally opposite of the first and second law of thermodynamics. First and second law. Not laws? Just saying. I mean, expecting quality writing from this douchebag. It goes against all scientific evidence that has been accumulated. Except no, it doesn't. Because you're making that up. Yet this lie is what many men believe today. And again, history. We don't see it happening anywhere in our universe today. What's this obsession with today? I mean, yes, we do, as a matter of fact, and observed instances of evolution in Google will give you examples. But what's this obsession with today? We don't see any evidence of this in the fossil record except all of it. If you ignore all the fossil record, then yes, you do not see any evidence of evolution in the fossil record. If you just pretend the fossils don't exist, then there's no evolution in the fossil record, which doesn't exist. Except it does, so it does. I would like to trace the history of evolution beginning with the fall of Satan from heaven through the last 6,000 years to modern-day evolution, and explain what those teaching this doctrine have planned for the future. Ooh. I mean, he can't put that in the text, so I felt I had to provide it for him. I would love for you to trace the history of evolution, Kent, in this chapter called The History of Evolution. You've spent, how many pages? 3 pages saying that you wanted to trace the history of evolution. 3 pages in your chapter, and you're still not to the fucking point. You're not even at the point where you're introducing your point yet. You're saying that there's a point that you want to make in the future. 3 pages in. Padded text much? To really understand the history of evolution, we have to understand the author. No. Who invented evolution, I think, is chapter 3, isn't it? But, whatever. We have to understand the author, period. Satan is the master-mind behind this false doctrine. Oh, well, great. Now we know. He was thrown out of heaven because of his desire to exalt himself to godhood. That, by the way, can't breathe. That right there, that claim that Satan wanted to be more powerful than God, or to be a god, makes Satan the most retarded character in all of fiction, and I am including people like Brian from Family Guy. You have Satan, right? This angel, Lucifer. He knows God. He was created to serve God. He knows that God is all-powerful, right? God can just snap his fingers and Lucifer never existed. Satan allegedly knows this. He knows it. He actually really knows that it is a fact. He has seen it happen before. And in his mind, he goes, I'm gonna fight God. It's like, there's a minefield, okay, followed by a moat filled with acid-proof sharks, and they have to be acid-proof sharks because the moat is just hydrofluoric acid. And then there's a wall made entirely out of broken glass. I mean, they just made a mold and poured broken glass and then took the mold away, and somehow the wall just stood there. And at the top, there's barbed wire. And the inside of the courtyard is just all barbed wire. I'm getting to a point. Try to follow. And in the middle of this sea of barbed wire is a guy in solid adamantium armor with a nuclear weapon mounted on his arm. He just pushes a button and there's a small nuclear explosion that he's immune to because his adamantium armor resists nuclear explosions and also it's radiation proof. And Timmy, with a stick and a band-aid on his knee as the only armor he has, wants to travel into the middle of this castle of broken glass, into the middle of this sea of barbed wire, through the moat of hydrofluoric acid and acid-proof sharks. And whatever I said about the exterior, because I've been going on this point too long, Timmy, with his little wooden stick, wants to traipse into the middle of there and defeat the enemy. That is Satan wanting to take on God. How fucking stupid would this character have to be to even think of such a thing? He wanted to become more powerful than God. He wanted to depose God. How? Is the only question you should be asking. And the only way this story makes sense is if you realize it's an allegory. It's some sort of analogy for some other thought. It's not a real person. It's just a euphemism. That is the only way this stupid character makes sense. But no, Satan is a real person. Timmy with his stick wants to go and defeat whatever the name of the emperor in Warhammer is. That is Satan. The dumbest character in all of fiction. And Kent Hovind is afraid of him. One of the underlying reasons that evolution appeals to so many people is because it appeals to man's pride. I'm going to humor him again with a shorter story. Man's pride. Man is so against God that they want to reinforce their pride by believing that they are no different from other apes. Isaiah 13:11 says, I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the proud. What does that have to do with anything? Why does evolution have to do with man's pride? Because God will cease the arrogancy of the proud. What the fuck does this quote have to do with what you just said? I mean, great, it has the word proud in it twice. Okay, it's not relevant. It's not even meaningful. It means nothing. God is against pride. He's against a lot of things, including thinking. The fuck does that make a difference for? In Isaiah, another Bible quote. You know it's got to be true. He's quoting from the same book twice. In Isaiah 14, verses 12 to 14, the Bible tells us of the fall of Satan from heaven. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Cutting down someone to the ground weakens nations? Was it the impact that weakened nations? Did it cause an earthquake? Or were nations only strong because Satan was helping them out, and when he lost his powers, they got all weaker as a result? Which means that God was not actually helping nations, which means Satan was, which means again, Satan in this story would be the benefactor, the protagonist. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. He was an angel in this fictional story. He was already in heaven. Why would he want to ascend into the place where he already is? I am going to ascend into my chair. There's so much work to be done. I mean, I'm in my chair right now, but, there's so much work to be done. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Okay, I guess in space, the fact that there's no direction unless you're in a gravity field means you can put your throne above it, but it doesn't really change anything. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation. I don't know. In the sides of the north. Oh, so in space, where heaven is, there's a north. I will be like the Most High. Again, dumbest character in all of fiction. Later on in the passage, God says that he will cast down Lucifer. And, get this, Voldemort, later in the passage, says, Nagini, dinner. Think about that. The fuck difference does it make? And I'm skipping these fucking quotes. Because none of this, again, has to do with the history of evolution. And I mean, I'm skipping a hell of a lot. Ezekiel, and here's a list of more just rapid-fire quotes. Leviticus 26:19, 1 Samuel 2:3, Psalm 10:2, Psalm 10:4, Psalm 73:6, Psalm 101:5, Psalm 11:9:21, 119:21, I should say. Proverbs 6:16, Proverbs 8:13, Proverbs 13:10, 15:25, 16:5, 16:8, 21:4, Isaiah 14, the same fucking quote he just put up top, literally 14, 12, 14, and here lower in the list is 14, 12, 16. He's adding 2 verses for some fucking reason. Jeremiah 9:23, Obadiah 3, Matthew 23:6, 23:12, Mark 7. The fuck? And the quotes aren't even there in full. It's pride goeth before destruction, ... and high look and a proud heart, ... is sin. Satan's fall, I will ascend, ... None of it has anything to do with anything. And I bet at least half of these are only related in the most tangential, barely relevant way possible. Like, here's one. Charity, ... is not puffed up. The fuck does that have to do with anything? There you have just a few of the many verses in the Bible that deal with pride. God hates pride. Oh, well, that's great. Your fictional character hates a thing. And, Voldemort hates muggles. So there you go. That's all you need to know. Voldemort hates muggles. In his pride, Satan decided he would exalt himself and take over the throne of God. We've gone over this literally 3 times now. What difference does it make? This is where evolution started. Finally, we get to the history part. After a pile of bullshit. That has nothing to do with where evolution started. It started in heaven in the heart of Satan. See, I knew he was already in heaven because he was in heaven. Why would he want to ascend to heaven? Skipping ahead, Cain promoted the evolutionary doctrine that man can progress by his own efforts. No. The story of Cain and Abel, by the way, is that Abel, I think he was the raiser of cattle, and Cain was the farmer, the tiller of the ground, and Cain gave up plants to God as an offering, and then Abel thought, like, hey, that's a good idea, I'm gonna kill one of my animals for God. And God's like, yeah, animals, awesome. Cain, why don't you have fucking animals to kill for me, cause I love blood, says God. And Cain's like, dude, you told me to take care of the fucking ground, I don't have any fucking animals, he has the fucking animals. And then Cain kills Abel. What does this have to do with evolution? What does this have to do with man progressing by his own efforts? Not a goddamn fucking thing! Skipping ahead, 2 brothers, this resulted in a curse being placed upon Ham's son, Canaan. Blah, blah, more Bible quotes, blah, blah, Tower of Babel, the flood, blah, blah, pantheism. Socrates was a pantheist, and you know how those pantheists are. They're all Satan-worshipping evildoers. Pakistan, China, blah, blah, Confucius, blah, the Buddhist religion, blah, blah, Thomas Huxley's book, John 3:16, we can't immediately quote John because it sounds like a foreign language to them, right? Because, you know, for God so loved the world that he sent his sole begotten Son as a sacrifice to himself so that he could forgive you for something he was ultimately responsible for. Totally foreign language. It's not foreign, you fucking retard. Blah, blah, many in the Alexandrian school, blah, 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 blah. Skipping ahead to Dagobah. Another man that is very important as we trace the history of evolution is Erasmus Darwin, the grandfather of Charles Darwin. And I skipped a hell of a lot. But before that, there's something about the French Revolution. So I assume that this is the first time the name Darwin is mentioned. Finally, after I lost track of pages, that must be like 12 or 15 pages just of crap that has nothing to do with anything and is filled with Kent Hovind's bad history. This video is going to be long enough with me just addressing the Darwin stuff without me going into why Kent Hovind doesn't know a goddamn thing about anything in history. So, Erasmus Darwin, he was born in 1731 and died in 1802. He was an extremely fat person. Go on, Kent. What does being fat have to do with anything? Oh, wait, he's going to tell us. In fact, he was so fat they had to cut a curve in the dining room table so that he could get up to the table. Really? They had to cut a curve into the table so he could get up to the table? When was that? When he was sitting at the table? He was a medical doctor. Well, it's a shame he wasn't a carpenter, because then he would have been able to cut the curve himself. He was also very immoral. Oh, well, he's fat and immoral? Send him to hell, God. Just kill the fucker. Oh, wait, he died in 1802. 71 years. He was so evil and immoral and fat that he lived 71 years. He had 12 legitimate children and 2 illegitimate children. Because, as we all know, no Christian ever has illegitimate children. Except many of them. Except for those, no Christian ever has illegitimate children. If you're a Christian, your sperm stops working when it's in a foreign vagina. You know, the female body has a way of shutting that whole thing down. He was known to have had many affairs. Well, with illegitimate children, I imagine that he would have been known to have many affairs. So what? He was a great admirer of the French philosopher Rousseau, who was mentioned a little bit earlier. So what? Who was the chief philosopher of the French Revolution. Who the fuck cares? Darwin was a deist, not an atheist, but was a strong opponent of Christianity. That means to me that at least he had some sense. In 1794, he wrote a book called Zoonomia, which contained many of the evolutionary ideas that were later claimed by Charles, his grandson. Don't fucking call him Charles. You're not on that friendly terms. The United States and England were not yet ready to accept the evolutionary ideas because there was still such a strong Christian influence. About 65 years later, his grandson, Charles, would get credit for modern ideas of evolution because he published. That's why he published. Erasmus Darwin founded the Lunar Society in Birmingham, England in the late 1700s. Okay, I'm going to do something I really didn't want to do, but I'm Googling the Lunar Society of Birmingham. Wikipedia, because it's the fastest source and I didn't prepare this ahead of time, was a dinner club and informal learned society of prominent figures in the Middle Enlightenment, including industrialists, natural philosophers, and intellectuals who met regularly between 1765 and 1813. So it died like 11 years after Darwin did. Erasmus Darwin, I should specify. Because the society would meet during the full moon. That's it. That is basically all of it. There's more stuff. You can Google it for yourself. I'm not going to go into it myself. Who the fuck cares? There's all sorts of societies that meet all around the world. What does that have to do with anything? For that matter, what the fuck difference does it make that Erasmus Darwin was fat? Or that he had illegitimate children? Oh, a mathematician says 2 plus 2 equals 4, but he has illegitimate children, so I'm going to remain skeptical of that evil mathematician's statements about mathematics. Is that the point? And I apologize for this. I can't breathe, and I need to breathe. That's one of the things the human body needs. I think it is not a coincidence that people who are atheists or evolutionists frequently have a wicked lifestyle, as opposed to, say, tax frauds, or perhaps people who sleep with gay prostitutes while snorting meth out of their ass crack. You mean that kind of a wicked lifestyle? I'm just asking here. How about people who get high on OxyContin? Or alcoholics, or people who confuse the word loofah for the word falafel and then harass women into having sex with them. How about that? How about people who sleep with underage pages in the White House? How about that? You mean that kind of a wicked lifestyle from Christians? Fuck you, Kent Hovind. Fuck you so fucking much. Got a little bit too worked up there. But this is just so blatantly false. People who have a wicked lifestyle exist no matter what they believe in. It just happens because we're people and we have desires, and some desires society thinks are bad. Like, for instance, smoking pot, which I would assume Kent Hovind thinks is a wicked lifestyle. Smoking pot. People like myself would consider that committing tax fraud is a wicked lifestyle, but I'm sure Kent Hovind does not see it that way, since he's in jail, and I think he was kept in jail longer than it should have been, because even though he was up for parole, he stated that he didn't know what he did wrong, even though it was explained to him, including by his lawyer, who said, pay your taxes, it's not going to fly, this excuse that you don't own anything, it says it's all God. Fucking retarded. Or at least a lifestyle against the plain teachings of the Bible. 3 words for you, Kent Hovind. Render unto Caesar. Fuck you. Therefore, evolution is an easy way for them to justify their lifestyle. Except evolution has nothing to do with a fucking lifestyle. It's a scientific fact. Things change over time. Animals, living organisms, reproduce and have variations, and that causes adaptation over time. What the fuck does that have to do with you not wanting to pay your fucking taxes, or living a wicked lifestyle? The problem is one of philosophy, not one of science. I don't even know what that means. Evolution is not a philosophy, and lifestyle has nothing to do with science. So, I guess, yes, it is a problem of philosophy, but it has nothing to do with evolution. And what the fuck does this have to do with history? Oh, right. People believe in this because historically they want to do bad things. Right. Okay, now we're finally getting to a point. Page 33 in the document, and we've finally gotten to the point of Chapter 1. Chapter 1, by the way, started at page 4. I think it was page 4. Was it page 4? No, page 9. So we're 24 pages later. We finally get to the point of Chapter 1. 24 pages. Repeated 3 times that he would get to a point. In the first 2 pages, 24 pages later, he gets to the fucking point. Kind of. I bet it's not going to last long. They don't want there to be a God because of their wicked lifestyle. Well, Kent, what does that say about you? What does that say about your son, who also defrauds people of their money in order to live a lavish, wicked lifestyle based on cheating and lying to people? The next man with an influential part in this history of evolution was Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, born in 1744, died in 1829. I'm not entirely sure why he felt the need to put the dates, because I don't see that they're really that relevant, but I suppose they're interesting. In any case, Lamarck wrote 2 famous books on zoology, one in 1809 and one in 1815. Who cares? He was a French atheist. Who the fuck cares? What difference does that fucking make? He was appointed by the French revolutionary government. I don't know what Kent Hovind's obsession is with the revolutionary government in France, but who the fuck cares? He was bitterly anti-Bible and anti-Christian, and anyone with any fucking sense would be if they read the fucking thing. He hated the Bible, as do I, especially the creation and flood story. Well, I don't hate those, I just think they're completely stupid. They're not even interesting. I mean, give me an interesting story. Anytime. There's this one book I own. It's called Face of the Enemy. It's by some unknown author, and I think there's a sequel written by someone else. I can't even find this book online. I have it. I read it. It is badly written. But the story's engaging. I mean, Kurt Ellicott, the main character, he's flat, he's two-dimensional, he's boring, the whole thing just reeks of, I wanted to tell a story but I didn't know how to write. The problem is, I read this book repeatedly. I've read it more than once, more than 5 times, because even though it's badly written, it's engaging. I like the story, I like the world it's set in. The world makes up for the crappy characters, I feel. The Bible doesn't even have that. It has a crappy world filled with two-dimensional idiot characters and events that are so unbelievable that they're not even interesting. Oh, the waters rose up because the core of the earth was filled with water and it came out and There's your flood story. It's a crappy book. What the fuck? So yeah, okay, he hates the creation flood story. You say so. I have no reason to believe anything Kent Hovind says. I don't give a fuck, but if he did, good for him. Period. He was determined to give people an alternative explanation for how the earth got here beside the creation and the flood. Well, dumbass, the flood has nothing to do with how the earth got here in the first place. He was also an immoral man, because that's relevant to whether he's right or wrong. You know, if someone commits like tax fraud, you shouldn't trust anything they say. Oh wait, he had 6 illegitimate children by 3 different women. A French man had illegitimate children? I'm sorry. that was unfair. That was uncalled for. But who the fuck cares? I mean, seriously. He taught a theory that giraffes had longer necks because they would stretch their necks to reach the leaves higher on the trees. Yeah, this was the Lamarckian idea of evolution. That because they would stretch their necks, the stretched necks would get passed down. But the problem is, no one accepts Lamarckian evolution because he didn't have a mechanism, and anyways, that's not how the necks get longer. Animals that were born with a longer neck would have more chances at surviving, and that would get passed down because they wouldn't be fucking dead. I've had to explain this to someone in the YouTube comments recently. Dead animals don't make very many babies, and if you die, you can't have babies. That means that your babies, which don't exist, they don't exist. If you survive, you have babies. If you die, you don't. So anything that helps survival gets passed down. And I'm spraying because I can't breathe. I apologize profusely. I don't know why I got this. I think I'm starting a cold or something. God must be striking me down with a minor annoyance. Those that were not able to stretch would simply die out in times of drought. Then the long necks giraffes would pass that trait onto their children. This is known as the inheritance of acquired characteristics. There is no biologist today that believes this theory. Correct. No one believes this. Why the fuck is this here if no one believes it? Acquired traits are not inherited because they have no effect on the genetic matter. Lamarck died in poverty and was unwanted when he died. Oh, what a Christian thing to say. He died in poverty and he was unwanted when he died. And I bet that made Kent Hovind pause so he could rub wood out. One of the men greatly influenced by Lamarck was a man named Charles Lyell. Lyell was born, blah blah, father of modern geology. He was a lawyer, not a scientist, and as you know, only scientists should have anything to say about science. Oh wait, Kent Hovind doesn't care about that thing because he's not a fucking scientist, and yet, here we go. He developed what is called the geologic column. This column is still taught in every earth science classroom today. The whole idea of the geologic column is based on uniformitarianism. No, it's not. Or the present is the key to the past. The geologic column is this idea that the Earth has various layers of surface material based on the stuff that happens to the Earth. We assume that stuff happened in the past the same way it does today, because if we don't assume that, then we have nothing. Nothing. None of our understanding works. This knife, if uniformitarianism is wrong, if this knife, is not the same now as it was in the past, then it would be impossible to know when this would cease to function. I mean, why even have knives? Because tomorrow I might just flip it out and touch something and it might turn into a duck. Uniformitarianism is important because if we assume everything happens the same way all the time and doesn't just change magically by magic because Magic Man, then we actually can't form a basis of understanding. If we can't form a basis of understanding, our name is now Kent Hovind. This is mentioned in 2 Peter 3, where it says, in the last days scoffers are going to come, and then will say all things continue as they were. The whole point of evolution is that things change. So the scoffers, and I love how they repeat this word scoffer because they think it's a magical word. I assume they think it's a magical word. There's people who make fun of religion, and then there's scoffers. It's like people who don't believe in God, and then there's atheists. They have this obsession with words that they don't understand. Evolutionists, those people who don't really exist but are also known by more intelligent individuals as biologists, don't say all things will continue as they were. In fact, the last person who seriously said that all things continued as they were was Fred Hoyle, the guy who named the Big Bang Theory because he thought it was a joke, because he believed in a solid state universe, and oh, by the way, he's a Christian. So I assume Christians are the scoffers that are mentioned here? I'm just saying. The flood explains geology. That's done. The flood explains geology. That's it. There we go. We can rest on our laurels. The present processes do not explain geology. Oh well, I'm glad he clarified that. The Colorado River did not form the Grand Canyon, except it fucking did. And here we get to the Venom Fang X thing, I'm sure, where he says that the Grand Canyon could have been carved in about 5 minutes by the floodwaters magically following the trench of the Grand Canyon, which did not actually exist at the time, but when it was just washing over the whole world, this wave of water just concentrated in some place and started just drawing lines into the solid granite. All at once, it's like the water was going on an amusement park ride. It's like, wee, we're drawing the Grand Canyon, and then the Grand Canyon existed, and the flood waters just washed over everything and didn't, carve anything else. And magic. The Grand Canyon was formed as the flood went down. Oh, yay, exactly as I predicted. Lyell took the old philosophy of naturalism. The old philosophy in the world is religion, which is not a philosophy and is just really fucking old. Naturalism is fairly new, and applied it to Earth history. Sadly, many of the creationists of his day accepted his philosophy, except it's not a fucking philosophy. They thought it was time to update the Bible and somehow make the biblical account of creation include eons of time. Not eons, but certainly more than 6,000 years, which is less time than the domestication of dogs took place. That happened like 100 million years ago. So you're only wrong by about a factor of 100. That's a bit much, but I'm rounding up heavily because I don't feel like doing the calculation for 6,000 to 100,000. Whatever. It's like 10, 15, add carry the 1, whatever. A couple tens of thousands of times wrong. Lyell cleverly trapped Christians of his day with his erroneous teaching. Well, if it was erroneous, he wasn't trapping anyone. If he was seriously misled, which he wasn't, but if he were, then he wouldn't be trapping anyone. He wouldn't be cleverly trapping anyone. He would be accidentally confusing people. But, hey, if you want to make it sound more, what's that word? I can't remember the word. The words are just escaping out of my head today. More sinister, that's the word. If you want to make it sound more sinister, then yes. Lyell, by pointing out that the Earth is not actually 6,000 years old and that the Grand Canyon wasn't formed in about 5 minutes. Yes, if you want to make that sound sinister, the fact that reality is real and the Bible is full of bullshit, then cleverly trapped. He wrote a book called Principles of Geology. It was this book that influenced Charles Darwin while he was on his voyage on the HMS Beagle many years later. Blah blah, Lyell was Darwin's friend, urged him to publish his book, Origin of Species. The only thing that urged Darwin to publish his book was the fact that someone else was about to, scoop him, publish first, and then he released it. He did hold off for years because he was worried about upsetting Christians. Evil atheist Charles Darwin didn't want to upset Christians. Seems legit. Sorry. That's the air trying to escape because I can't. It's annoying. Darwin was born in 1809 and died in 1882. He is most famous for two books that he authored. The second one was The Descent of Man. The first one, and most famous, is The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. This book also had a subtitle called The Preservation of the Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So he was a racist. Except as Logic, here on YouTube, points out in one of his series, I think it's Hello, I'm a Scientist, the racism present in The Origin of Species, the preservation of the favored races, has to do with races of cabbage or pigeons. Humans are barely ever mentioned. And the only thing that Darwin ever really said about black people, because of course that's what racists hate, right? If you have no concept of what words mean, then racist means hating black people. Darwin said that he actually felt more sympathy for the barbarian races, which is what everyone called, more primitive societies at the time, because political correctness didn't exist and these words just existed. To explain a little bit more in detail why words change like that, retard used to be a medical term. But kids, mostly, started using the term to insult other kids. And so the word became an insult. So then you had words like slow, or mentally deficient, and things like that, mentally handicapped. And now you have differently able. Because complainers take these words that have now become insults, even though they were medical terms at one point, and they say you can't keep using that word, it's mean, except it's the correct word. Retarded means kept back, and these people are retarded. So, maybe it's insulting to people who are actually mentally troubled. Sorry, you do have a medical condition. These people don't, and they are retarded, while you with a medical condition are not retarded. That's the only way I can clarify why races would have changed meaning over the time to mean what it does now and was used back then, and why other terms, whatever. The favored races does not mean Darwin was racist. Blah, blah, blah. Next key character in the history of evolution is Karl Marx. No, it's not. No, he isn't. No, he wasn't. He's known as the father of communism. Good for him. It has nothing to do with evolution. Evolution is not communist. So, Das Kapital. Alfred Russel Wallace. I think it's Wallace who was about to publish. Come to think of it. Now that I see the name, I think it does remind me that he was about to publish. Huxley, Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog. He actively promoted Darwin's work after his publication of Origin of Species. He was very strong in his beliefs and anxious for Christianity to be overthrown. Christianity to be overthrown. Good for him. Forward-thinking man, that Thomas Huxley. Not quite like Aldous Huxley, but certainly one of the good Huxleys. He is the one that actually made up the term agnostic. I think that's right. But the term agnostic does have its own meaning. It has nothing to do with atheism, has nothing to do with trying to make atheism more acceptable. It's a different word for a different meaning, and has nothing to do with the history of evolution anyways. Evolution lends itself readily to racism. Here it is, which can be seen by the following quotes from Darwin and Huxley. I'm going to read this, although it's bullshit. At some future period, not very distant, as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. Sure. Just look at the world today. Do we have many tribes of non-technological, little bands of people roaming around with their houses on their backs? No, we don't really see that. Because civilization has overtaken the way of life of all people. That's what that means. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes will no doubt be exterminated. Well, that's wrong, because we still have chimps, gorillas. Some of them are endangered, but, you know, they're not being exterminated. There's no reason to go out and kill them. I think the reason is because the author of this, The Descent of Man, which, you know, it's not even Darwin, it's not even a quote from Darwin or Huxley. The fuck? But there was this thought that because we were so closely related, we would get upset and we would want to go out and murder the reminders that we're animals so that we could prop ourselves up as being special, the way that religious people do. But, of course, that hasn't happened. Not intentionally, at least. For the most part. No rational man cognizant of the facts believe that the average Negro is the equal, still less the superior, of the white man. Lay Sermons, Addresses and Reviews, Appleton, 1871. Not Darwin, not Huxley. So these quotes from Darwin and Huxley are not from Darwin, are not from Huxley. Well done, you lying sack of shit, Kent Hovind. I hope you get shivved. I mean that. Darwin's notion that the various races were at different evolutionary distances from the apes, with Negroes at the bottom and Caucasian at the top. See again, bottom, top, downward, upward. It's this false terminology that no one uses except Kent Hovind. Maybe Negroes were thought to be less evolved than humans. That doesn't make... I just said that. Negroes were thought to be less evolved than Caucasians. Humans. I am so sorry for that slip-up. Wow. That's embarrassing. But, you know, they're both humans, so the word was just floating in my head there. Maybe some people thought Negroes were less evolved than white people. They were wrong. Simple as that. There's no metric anyway. It's not like a ladder. You can't say, oh, you're on rung 3, you have to be on rung 8. There's no rung. We are all equally evolved from every other animal. The most simplest single-celled organism is as evolved as a human being, just in a different direction. We all started at the same point, and some people, again with the wrong terms here, some animals have spun off and they stay at pretty much the same place because they're in their niche. But they still change over time. There's still stuff happening. The DNA is still changing. Even if they stay pretty much the same as they were before, they're still different in some small ways. And then there's animals that just vary and take another turn, and then you have humans. But the time of evolution is the same. There's no more evolved, less evolved. It's nothing to do with that. Haeckel, you know, probably the embryos again, blah, blah, who the fuck cares? No supernatural designers needed. He believed that evolution can answer all the problems. He was the leader of the New Age movement until his death in talking about Julian Huxley. Another Huxley. Great. Okay, Julian Huxley was the leader of the New Age movement. He thought no supernatural designers needed, and in fact, he was right. Great. His brother Aldous Huxley, born, died, blah, leader of modern drug culture. He was he? I don't know Aldous Huxley as a leader in modern drug culture, given that he died in 1963. He was an atheist, a philosopher, and a strong advocate of hallucinogenic drugs. I know Aldous Huxley. I hope it's the same Aldous Huxley. I know an Aldous Huxley who was an author. Are there two? I think there's two. Come to think of it. Whatever. Doesn't matter. None of that matters with the theory of evolution. He likes drugs, that means evolution is wrong. Not a valid argument. Skipping ahead again. Some guy named Osborne, where is it? Henry Fairfield Osborne, American anthropologist. Negroid stock is even more ancient than the Caucasian and Mongolian, as may be proved by an examination not only of the brain, of the hair, of the bodily characters, such as the teeth, genitalia, sense organs, but of the instincts, the intelligence. The standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of the 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapien. So this was a guy in 1925 who was racist and thought Negroids were different species from Homo sapiens, which amusingly is like my slip-up saying Negroids and then humans. That is completely wrong. The Negroid stock is more ancient, though, because white people and Asian people are descended from the Negroid race. Right. We are all descended from African early humans. The cradle of human life is somewhere in Africa, and it's spread out from there. So, yes, the Negroid stock is even more ancient than white people. They were first, we came later. Simple as that. The rest, maybe the intelligence was below average, but in 1925, I don't imagine that there was much in the way of education for black people in places like, Africa. Certainly less than there is today. And if you take someone who has never been to school and put them up against a full-grown adult in, say, Canada, then yes, I bet that someone who has never been to school and has black skin will show as less intelligent than a white person who has been to school for years. Just saying. Bad methodology means, whatever. And that's it. I'm skipping a whole bunch. It ends with something about Shintoism for some fucking reason. Japan's actions in World War II. What the fuck does that have to do with where did evolution come from? We've already covered who invented it after fucking pages after pages of nonsense. We finally got to the point evolution was invented by Darwin based on some ideas his grandfather had. Good. End of chapter. No, it keeps going, and it ends with World War II because they were determined to take over the world just like Hitler was doing in Germany. Both of them were motivated by a desire to help evolution along, except no, it wasn't, because as Hitler himself said, he thought he was doing the work of the Lord in killing the Jew. I'm probably paraphrasing. Anyways, I'm saying it in English, and he would have said it in German. But no, it had nothing to do with evolution. Neither did Japan. It was divine right. Kind of. Nothing to do with evolution. At all. At all. Not a single bit. So what the fuck? This goes right back to the Garden of Eden where Satan said, "Ye shall be as gods." Satan was right in that passage. Eating the fruit of knowledge of good and evil made them understand good and evil, and that allowed human beings to invent religion. So, in a very real sense, because God always agrees with you, if you're religious, God is a reflection of your own innermost thoughts, so God is a product of your own brain. So, yes, in a very real sense, religious people are as gods, because God is in their head, and it's them. So that's the end of the first chapter, the extremely long and pointless one. I hope it gets better. I doubt it will, sadly. But I will be back shortly with Chapter 2, The Religion of Evolution.